Hey guys, CecelyV here. I am back for part 1.2, so the second part of part 1 for drawing fundamentals. Last time we used these still lifes here, the simple one with the dominoes, the slightly more complex one, and then this more advanced one as far as their shapes and forms, to talk about shape and form, identifying those things, identifying planes, how to break up the complex forms into smaller parts so that it's more easily digestible to draw. And today we're going to talk about proportion and space. So the reason proportion and space are important is because, so say we've identified everything in this drawing and we're ready to start placing it on our page. We need to know, first of all, you're going to look at your picture plane and say, okay, well, if this is the bottom of my picture plane, then you're going to look at the proportion of all of these objects in relation to the edges of your paper, right? So you would eyeball it, because there's no reason to get out a, please, you don't have to get out a ruler or measure, it's not that serious. Just eyeball it and be like, okay, well, I know that there's only this much space between the edge of this container and this edge here, and then there's a bit more space here, right? So you would just kind of be eyeballing how much space you have from the edges of things, because that gives you an idea of, no sticky keys, of where this placement is on your paper, right? And then proportion is really about the size relationships and placing relationships from one object to another, and from between each object and the whole, right? So when you're drawing this, you want to know, okay, here's my envelope for this large container, but where does this one right here go in relation to the bigger one right here, right? So when you, after you've placed this, you can easily say, okay, well, this one comes here. And what I mean is if you, these are called plumb lines. I called myself trying to do a broken line. That didn't work out. These are called plumb lines. So if I do a horizontal plumb line, I can say, okay, in my envelope shape here, this top of this domino lands right about here. So I know I can make a light mark there and know, hey, I'm not going to go any higher. That's where this lives as far as on this lower half of the picture plane, right? And then I could even say, okay, this is my corner, and then I would do my angles, and I'll show you guys how to do that in another video, trying to keep these digestible. So we would place our angles for this, and then we say, okay, well, this domino right here is touching, it's leaning up against this container, but where on the container is it as far as its position in relation to, and its size in proportion to, this larger container here? And so we want to know, okay, well, we can say here's this edge here, right? And then this comes like right here, so we know it's just down at the very bottom here. And the reason that matters is if we don't take the time to figure out where these things live in relation to each other, then you step back from your drawing and you can't figure out what's wrong. Like, why is this domino too high or too low or too big or too far or whatever? So understanding size proportional relationships and positioning relationships, the space relationships, as you block in your drawing, that's what's going to be part of the structure and part of the bones, and that helps your drawing to be more accurate. And when it's more accurate, and your eye should be moving around the whole piece and all your elements as you block them in, specifically so that you make sure all of your relationships are working the way you need them to. As far as this area here inside, it's the same thing. We can say, okay, we're going to focus on this area right here. And I'll go ahead and change colors real quick here. Okay, so let's say we're saying, okay, we're just gonna focus on this area right here. And we need to understand the space in here. So on this back line, we can say, okay, we don't have to do anything detailed yet. So this little like line bit here and this, that, where it goes like that, all that, that's what you call, that would be the contour, the outer contour of this whole big dirt shape. We don't have to worry about that right now. We just have to understand there's about this much space from the top of this edge of the container to the dirt, right? So we can just say, hey, we're gonna block off roughly, that's the space that you can see of the container over there, and this is the space that you can see over there. That's all you need at first. You just have to block it in so that you know the dirt lives below these lines, and that's it, right? And then from there, I really should be doing this on a separate layer, but won't worry about it for this one. We'll do blue, I guess. And then so inside here, we can, it's the same thing. We know, okay, so these dominoes in proportion to the containing shape of the top of the container. And then we need to understand their proportion to each other. So we know that this one crosses the line of this corner. So when we place it, that's really all we have to have in mind there is we need to see, okay, it only comes up above the container that much. It's not a lot, right? Just that little space there. And then we know that there is not much space between, it's literally like that much space between the bottom of this one and the top of this one. So we just need to take into account. And also here, it's about in the middle of that one. So the corner of this one is about in the middle of that one. So for accurate placement, we need to understand that sort of spatial proportion or spatial relationship and proportional relationship as far as size. This is sticking out. Let's see, we'll just make a square X there. And then, so they're similar sized X's, right? So about the same amount of space is showing roughly equally proportioned of sticking up out of the dirt, right? Versus this one and this one, which are not sticking out of the dirt in the same proportion, the same surface area is not sticking out. So we said, okay, there's only that much space. So we would just place this and just do it as like a quick little rectangle. You don't even have to do the dirt part yet. You could just do that shape right there. And then we know, hey, there's not a lot of space, right? It's pretty much right in front. There's not much space there. And then we just go like this. If it helps to do that shape and that shape, just so that you understand for yourself, hey, there's dirt there, I don't need to draw anything else, we can definitely do that. And so that's how you would, we know that this is sitting on this edge of, here's this rough, space boundary for this dirt stuff. And this one is almost right up against, there's a little bit of the dirt popping up here, but mostly this is right up against the edge, right? So it kind of makes this kind of curvy shape. So then all the dominoes are kind of going like this, right? That's kind of the flow, the gesture line for those. And we know there's not a lot of space in between all of them. This one has very little surface area. This one right here, very little surface area sticking out in relation to the others, all the other dominoes except for this one. And it's the furthest away as far as in this contained area at the top, right? And then so we can just come from the corner here and come up and then just block that in. So if we take out our background, we've still placed everything pretty well. And then the dirt is details that would have to be treated as tone and like some of the major shapes. So say we've blocked everything in there, except for the smallest shapes, you're pretty good to go. Let me get a different color here. So let's say we wanted to get into these little shapes, right? I'm gonna zoom in here and I'm gonna make my brush a bit smaller. You don't have to do every single little shape. I encourage you not to drive yourself mad trying to do every single little dirt shape. It's gonna drive you crazy. You want to pull out the ones that you see more immediately, if that makes sense. So like when I look at this, you zoom out and you want to pick it from a distance. So like this one stands out right here. This right here, just because it's a boundary against that domino. And then this one over here, really it's a lot of the brighter ones. And then this shadow area of stuff sticks out to me here. And then really that's most of it. This shadow area sticks out right there. And the rest of this just doesn't really stand out much to me. Aside from maybe these shadow shapes over here. Okay, and I say all that to say, when you go to block this in, you can just indicate by saying, okay, I'm gonna make this line here. You can get your edges, your edge shapes of these here, just so that you understand, hey, this is where this dirt stuff is in proportion in relation to the dominoes, right? Same thing here. But I wouldn't do a whole lot more than that, simply because you are going to have to render that in tones, in light and shadow. So you, which is a whole different discussion after you get past the stage of blocking in your drawing. Then you have to think about local tone, and you have to think about where your light's coming from, and so on and so forth. And we will get there, but not in this video. So hopefully that makes sense. Excuse me, I'm gonna save that. It's being slow, but that's okay. So let me zoom out of this a little bit. Okay. Oh, and I do apologize. In my last video, part 1.1, I was telling you guys about layers and everything, and I didn't realize that my little circle for my head was covering the layers, so I do apologize. This area over here is where I was, and so this is your color picker, this is your navigator to show you, that's your navigator, so you can have a step back view of what you're working on, your color swatches, and then of course your layer panel. So yeah, as far as continuing the discussion about proportion, in this one, I'm gonna go ahead and knock the opacity down on this, which means I make it a little less visible. Get a new layer, and I'm gonna call it proportion. Did I type that right? I don't know. Proportion. There we go. In this one, our proportion relationships are a little bit different. Everything is, the two main things are bigger. So we drop another plumb line. So say we've already got our forms down. Say we said, okay, we're going to start at this corner here, and we did all that work for the forms and shapes that we did yesterday. And now we want to make sure we're checking where everything is. So we can drop some plumb lines. Like, so here is a horizontal plumb line to go across. Now we know in relation to where this top is and this bottom is, there's only that much space between the top of this candle and where this that much space between the top of this candle and the top of this geode thing, right? And then we could say, okay, here's the bottom of the geode, and it's crossing this bottom little space of the candle, right? So if you get those two relationships in, then you know that you've placed this geode and the candle in the correct proportion to each other. Okay. Also, you would want to make sure you got this part, which is, okay, this is part of the shape hierarchy thing I was mentioning earlier. This geode is in front of. So if you were to draw through, right, this is coming over this just a little bit, not a lot, but right there they overlap, right? with the geode being in front. And then the rest is pretty straightforward for this one. I would actually make sure I understood where this sits, this rock here, or crystal, geode, one of those, where it sits in relation to both the candle and the geode. So we know if we zoom in here, it's only taking up that little bit of space. So it's really not that high up from this corner, but it is in this corner. Which means it's not in the middle, it's not over here, right? And that's important, because if you're looking and you're trying to draw what you think you see instead of what you actually see, you could move that somewhere it doesn't actually live. So paying attention to where its placement is in relation to the other objects is how we get our proportions correct. So you can actually do, zooming, I need a brush. So we can do like a little gesture line. I don't know if you guys have seen my videos about the line of action or gesture lines. It's not just for the human figure. So I can say, okay, this goes like this, right? And then I can just start placing the rocks along that line. If that's a little bit too amorphous for you guys, or you haven't done a lot of figure drawing to have that make sense, then you can use angles just as easily. So you could say, okay, here's the angle from, and you could take a ruler or your pencil to do this. You could say, okay, here's the tip of this and the tip of this. And then so one can connect to the other, and then you understand the angle that that sits on, right? You can say, here's the edge of this one, the edge of this one, the edge of this one. And so here is the angle that those sit on at the bottom. Here's the angles at these two on the top. So that's the angle that those sit on. And then those things become, you know, kind of like, almost kind of like the envelope for these, right? So it sticks out. Go away, sticky keys. I know this sticks out a bit, and that's okay. The idea is to understand the space well enough to get everything blocked in, okay? So, as far as proportion goes, we also want to make sure we understand, okay, here's this corner. It's like almost touching, just about touching on the candle. So we want to say, okay, it goes on here on the candle, and this part goes here on the candle. So it's not quite outside of the shadow of the candle, but almost, right? And then, of course, we know that these, helpfully, we just did that, right? That is on the same horizontal top as this rock here. So if you find this bottom and it lines up with where it lives in relation to the candle, then you also have the top corner of this rock right here. So hopefully that all makes sense. I will be doing some actual demos with these references, and I'll do it probably drawing traditionally. I will do some digital stuff more in the future, but there is a little bit of a disconnect when you're drawing with a tablet or versus analog with the pencil and stuff. And I highly recommend everybody, even if you really love digital, make sure you do some practice traditionally, because there's just a certain amount of feedback with, you know, the pressure of your pencil and how you do your lines and how you use it to measure your angles, and the pressure needed to do different types of tones with different types of graded pencils, stuff like that. It really helps to make that transition back and forth from traditional to digital and vice versa a lot smoother when you have the practice in both. So I think that's about it for this one. What did I just do with my pen? Oh, sorry. The only other thing is, same thing, if you were going to use this whole picture plane as opposed to, you know, cropping it or whatever, then you would say, okay, so here's the edge of this roughly on my picture plane, and the bottom is here, this edge is here, and we already said this one is here. So that matters because that means all of this area here, right, and this area here, this area here, And all of that there is irrelevant, right? You don't need it. This is some extra space for your drawing, maybe a nice place to set your hand if you're shading, adding your tones. But otherwise, you don't need that. You just need this area where your drawing elements actually live, right? And then for this one, same type of deal. Let's get this one, proportions. I didn't spell that right. Proportions. I didn't spell it right still. We won't worry about it. I'm gonna make this smaller. Okay, so we'll pick a darker blue. So same ideas, right? You want to establish the edges, right? And oops, make that a little smaller. And then the top here. So this is where, if we take all of this out, and all of that out, and all of this stuff up here, and all of that, it provides a nice sort of, you know, spatial background. It can provide background interest, but we don't need to place anything in those areas, right? Honestly, if I'm drawing this, I probably would take this out too. Not the space, but I just would not draw this edge. This is the edge of a photo box that I photographed the references in. So I would leave that out. It's your drawing, so if something isn't working, feel free to take it out. It's fine. So same type of thing. This is overlapping this, but we are not going to start with that because it's not the biggest shape, right? So we're going to start with the biggest shape first. We would have already blocked in based on our forms here that we broke up. And then we would do this one and make sure it's overlapping and make sure we understand, okay, here's the top of this one. So it lives on this bottom part of this shoe. It doesn't come above this. And that's so we know that's where that lives. It's also on this outside edge on this side, right? And then over here, we know it overlaps with near the corner of the tongue here and right at the edge of this first little loop tie thing. So that's all very helpful when we're trying to figure out where it lives and trying to place things accurately. We can also take the bottom of this and drop another plumb line and come across. So then we know, okay, it comes at the maybe bottom fourth, bottom third or so of this sphere here. So we could place that one, right? Obviously you guys would do a better job drawing a circle than I did just then. And then we can also say, okay, this, the top of this is almost in the middle of this other sphere, and the edge of this hits almost right about the edge of this middle part of the shoe, and this edge hits just at the end of the shoelaces. So by dropping these plumb lines, we can figure out where everything lives and you know, how far down or up or over, and the size relationships in proportion to each object, to the whole and to each other. So same thing here, like, okay, so this is the space between, you know, the bottom and this, and then this is the space between this shoelace and the sphere. Now for the shoelaces, you guys are just going to do angles, right? So that's just going to be like, you know, what is the general angle of these things? So you could go like this. Obviously, it's more curved. That's okay. The general angles will serve well enough at first, right? And then you can always curve them later. But at least it gives you a starting place. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. I meant to get to the negative space and positive space and all that relationships, but I am running out of time for my screen recording. We're we're bootstrapping over here at CecelyV.com, so I gotta use the free tools on Vimeo. So I will just make a second part to this and talk about negative space in all three of these and use a different layer and colors and all that. So I hope that made sense to you guys. I hope you found that helpful. Please leave any questions or comments comments in the comments section, and we'll be back for another part, and we'll talk about space relationships, negative and positive space, and how that helps you set up your drawing. Okay, happy drawing. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.